In Dubai, the thermometer does not need to show 62 degrees Celsius for your body to feel it. During an extreme combination of heat and humidity in July, Dubai recorded conditions that felt exactly like 62 degrees. At that precise moment, the air outside no longer feels hot. It feels actively hostile. You open the heavy glass doors of a luxury hotel, and the atmosphere hits you not like weather, but like a physical wall. The moisture in the air is so thick, it warps the light reflecting off the pavement. And in that suffocating instant, you realize the terrifying truth about this city. The millions of tourists who fly here every year believe they are visiting a desert oasis. They are not. They are stepping into an artificial environment sustained by a fragile mechanical ecosystem. And the only thing keeping that hostile heat outside the thousands of glass towers is a massive relentless cooling machine that is never under any circumstances allowed to stop. But what happens when an entire city and its entire tourism industry can survive only while that machine keeps running? Your body carries its own brilliant emergency cooling system. When you step into the heat, your pores open and sweat reaches the skin. As that moisture evaporates, it carries thermal energy away from your body, leaving you cooler. It is a biological mechanism perfected over millions of years of human evolution. But in the extreme climate of the Persian Gulf, this biological defense system is being pushed toward total failure. In air that is heavily saturated with moisture, the sweat can remain on your body without evaporating. You are still sweating profusely. You are losing water. But you are simply no longer cooling down. This is the horror of the wet bulb temperature phenomenon, and it is silently rewriting the rules of human survival in Dubai. For the modern tourist, this creates a profound psychological shock. Tourism is fundamentally about exploration, about moving freely through a new space. But when the heat index climbs dangerously high, exploration becomes an act of physical endurance. The elderly, the young, and those with underlying conditions are the first to feel their biology betray them. Their heart rates elevate. Their core temperatures drift dangerously upward. The outdoor cafes, the expansive beaches, and the spectacular promenades that Dubai features in its marketing brochures transform into dead zones during the peak of the day. The tourism crisis begins exactly here, not with a sudden economic crash, but with the quiet shrinking of the physical world. A vacation to Dubai increasingly means navigating a network of sealed tubes. You move from the air-conditioned airport to the air-conditioned taxi to the air-conditioned hotel lobby to the air-conditioned mega mall. The outdoors is no longer a place to be experienced. It is a toxic environment that must be rapidly crossed, and when the human cooling system begins to fail, only the city's mechanical cooling system remains. The entire promise of Dubai, as a global destination, now rests on a single terrifying condition. The machinery must not fail. Dubai claims that it built a city in the desert, but when you look closely at the architecture, the glass skyscrapers, the sprawling retail complexes, and the towering hotels, it becomes clear that this is a deception. Dubai did not build a city adapted to the desert. It built thousands of giant refrigerated boxes and dropped them onto the sand. These structures do not interact with the local climate. They are engaged in a perpetual war against it. To maintain this illusion, Dubai has constructed a survival machine of unimaginable scale. It is called district cooling. Instead of hanging millions of small air conditioners on the sides of buildings, the city relies on massive centralized plants. These industrial facilities manufacture freezing water and pump it through a subterranean labyrinth of insulated pipes beneath the streets. The cold water flows into the basements of luxury hotels and high-rise apartments, where heat exchangers extract the cold and blow it into the lobbies and bedrooms. The warmed water is then pushed back through the pipes to the plant to be chilled again. This is not a mere utility. It is the life support system of the metropolis. The local cooling providers operate dozens of plants across the city, serving hundreds of thousands of customers, with a connected capacity exceeding 1.6 million refrigeration tons. This is engineering on a planetary scale. But this massive infrastructure is hiding a deep structural vulnerability. District cooling is incredibly efficient, which is exactly why it is so dangerous. Its efficiency is not proof that Dubai defeated the heat. It is proof that the city planners understand how catastrophic a systemic failure would become. Dubai has essentially placed its entire economy, its tourism sector, and the lives of its residents into the hands of water pumps, chiller units, and subterranean pipes. Dubai did not build one giant air conditioner. Dubai became the air conditioner, and an air conditioner is only as reliable as the power grid that feeds it. The vulnerability of Dubai is not found in the collapse of a single building, but in the absolute dependency of its entire ecosystem. A cooling plant may have a backup generator. A pump may have a redundant twin waiting beside it. A damaged section of pipe might be isolated and bypassed. But the hotel room on the 50th floor remains habitable only as long as the entire continuous chain of infrastructure functions perfectly. You need electricity to run the central chiller plant. You need enormous amounts of desalinated water to feed the cooling towers. You need high-pressure pumps to force the chilled water kilometers down the road. You need the building management systems to receive that water. You need the internal electrical grid of the skyscraper to power the fans that push the cold air into the hallways. If any critical link in this long, complex chain snaps, the illusion of the desert oasis shatters. This hyperdependency is placing unprecedented pressure on the tourism and hospitality sectors. Hotels are no longer just hospitality businesses, they are environmental containment facilities. The operating costs required to maintain an artificial winter inside a glass tower, while the outside feels like 60 degrees, are astronomical. This creates a severe hidden pressure on hotel profitability and room rates. When an entire destination requires industrial-scale life support simply to remain breathable, the economic model begins to crack. The profit margins are constantly fighting against the thermodynamic reality of the desert. Dubai does not have one Achilles heel. It has an entire chain of them buried under the asphalt. So let us do the one thing the entire master plan of this city is designed to prevent. Let us imagine turning the cooling off. Imagine a severe infrastructure anomaly during the absolute peak of a July afternoon. A cascade failure in a major district cooling network serving a dense tourism hub. The power to the lights might remain on. The elevators might still function on standard grid power. But deep in the basement, the flow of chilled water slowly grinds to a halt. The pumps fall silent. At first, nothing happens. This is the psychological trap of the modern glass tower. The corridors remain comfortably cool. The marble walls in the lobby still hold the temperature of yesterday. The cold water already inside the internal pipes continues to circulate. For the first 20 or 30 minutes, the thousands of tourists and residents inside the tower believe they are perfectly safe. They continue shopping, dining, and resting in their rooms. But the building is not safe. It is simply spending the very last reserves of cold stored inside its materials, and outside the sun does not experience a power failure. The relentless solar radiation continues to bombard the glass facades. The concrete structure continues to absorb thermal energy. The roof is baking under direct sunlight. Heat is relentlessly pushing its way into the building through every microscopic gap and across every pane of glass. The only thing that was pushing that heat back out has just stopped working. Within an hour, the atmosphere inside shifts. The air vents, which previously delivered a crisp breeze, now exhale a stagnant, heavy warmth. The vast open atriums of the luxury hotels begin to trap the rising heat. Dozens of floors above the street, panic begins to set in. These buildings were designed with windows that do not open. They are hermetically sealed boxes, completely reliant on mechanical ventilation. As the temperature climbs past 30 degrees inside the rooms, the air becomes heavy with the moisture of human breath and sweat. The corridors grow stifling. The stairwells, which lack primary ventilation, turn into vertical ovens. The most vulnerable people, the tourists who came for a luxury vacation, the elderly, the families with small children, are no longer standing outside in the sun. They are physically trapped inside the very glass boxes that were constructed to protect them. A backup generator might keep the emergency lights glowing, but a standard building generator cannot carry the colossal electrical load required to restart the massive chiller units. Stored cooling is finite. Human physical tolerance is finite. The heat outside has infinite patience. It is simply waiting to reclaim the space. A city built like this does not need to lose power for a week to experience a catastrophe. It only needs to lose cooling for slightly longer than a sealed glass tower can protect the fragile human biology trapped inside it. This extreme dependency is driving a slow, invisible economic strain, behind the glittering skyline. The survival machine is becoming too hungry. Recent data shows that Dubai's peak electricity demand surged to an astonishing 11.39 gigawatts, an increase of nearly 6% from the previous year. To put that into perspective, that is enough peak power to run a medium-sized European country, all being sucked into a single metropolitan area, primarily just to keep the air cold. At the exact same time, the demand for desalinated water reached record highs. In Dubai, electricity and water are fundamentally tied together in a loop of desperation. The city needs massive power plants to boil and filter seawater into fresh water. It then uses that fresh water to supply the cooling towers of the district cooling plants. It then needs even more electricity to chill that water and pump it to the buildings. This creates a terrifying treadmill for the local economy. In order to pay for this colossal expanding infrastructure, Dubai must constantly attract more tourists, build more hotels, and sell more real estate. But every new luxury tower that is completed becomes another permanent mouth connected to the life support machine. Every new shopping mall adds millions of cubic meters of air that must be artificially chilled every single day for the rest of its existence. Every record-breaking influx of tourists adds more body heat and more moisture into the indoor environments, forcing the chillers to work even harder. Dubai is trapped in a paradox of growth. The city must expand to survive economically, but every expansion makes the city physically harder to keep alive. This is the hidden tourism pressure. The city is locked in an escalating war with its own climate, and the cost of funding that war is rising every single summer. The infrastructure bill is bloating, and the pressure on retail and hotel profitability is immense. When you look closely at the empty storefronts in secondary malls or the shifting occupancy rates, you are not just seeing a normal market fluctuation. You are seeing a system that is struggling to generate enough revenue to justify the massive energetic cost of keeping its doors open. But the sheer cost of keeping this artificial climate running is now colliding with a new geopolitical and economic reality. Dubai is no longer the only mega destination in the Persian Gulf. Neighboring nations, particularly Saudi Arabia and Qatar, are currently pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into their own sprawling tourism, entertainment, and aviation infrastructures. They are aggressively targeting the exact same demographic of international transit passengers, luxury vacationers, and corporate events. And this fierce regional competition exposes Dubai's most critical economic vulnerability. As the battle for global tourists intensifies, regional destinations will inevitably compete on price to fill their rooms. But how can a hotel or a mega mall in Dubai significantly lower its prices when its daily operational baseline requires industrial-scale water desalination and continuous centralized district cooling simply to keep the building habitable? The fixed costs of biological survival in this extreme environment create a terrifyingly rigid floor for how cheap a vacation or a retail lease here can actually be. While other global cities can organically adjust their hospitality margins during economic downturns, Dubai's massive infrastructure demands its daily payment of electricity and chilled water, regardless of whether a hotel is at 90% occupancy or 30%. This is the hidden financial pressure quietly crushing the lower and mid-tier hospitality and retail sectors. A 20% decline in tourist foot traffic does not proportionally reduce the massive energy bill required to keep a glass tower from turning into a vertical oven. The profit margins are being violently squeezed between the unstoppable rise of local climate management costs and the intense downward pressure of regional tourism competition. The survival machine does not offer market discounts, and it certainly does not care about your hotel occupancy rate. The ultimate irony of Dubai's survival machine lies in the basic laws of physics. Air conditioning is a deceptive technology. It does not actually destroy heat, it merely moves it. When a massive chiller plant cools the water for a luxury hotel, it absorbs the heat from inside the building and uses electrical energy to physically throw that heat outside into the streets. The millions of air conditioning units, the district cooling towers, the vehicle exhausts, and the heat radiating from the endless miles of dark asphalt create a brutal feedback loop. Dubai is cooling its sealed glass boxes by dumping an ocean of thermal energy directly into the urban environment surrounding them. The city is quite literally cooking its own streets to keep its living rooms cold. The hotter the outdoor environment becomes, the harder the district cooling systems must work to fight the temperature difference. The harder the machinery works, the more electricity it draws, and the more waste heat it violently exhales back into the city. This thermodynamic trap is accelerating the erosion of Dubai's outdoor livability. The localized heat island effect makes the streets fundamentally hostile to pedestrian life. The retail businesses that rely on foot traffic find themselves paralyzed because walking from one block to another feels like a survival mission. The city is forced to build even larger indoor environments to compensate for the fact that they have ruined the outdoors. It is a treadmill of engineering. Dubai is utilizing machines that release massive amounts of heat to maintain the fragile illusion that the heat has somehow been defeated. For thousands of years, the saving grace of the desert has always been the sunset. In most arid climates, the moment the sun dips below the horizon, the sand rapidly loses its heat into the clear night sky. The air cools. The human body is finally granted a window of time to recover from the brutal assault of the day. But Dubai is built on the coast of the Persian Gulf, and the water changes everything. The Gulf is incredibly shallow and extremely warm. As the day ends, the sea breeze pushes massive amounts of humid marine air directly into the concrete canyons of the city. Because of this geographical curse, the most dangerous and disturbing moments in Dubai often do not arrive at high noon. Along this specific coastline, the extreme humid heat conditions, the suffocating wet bulb temperatures frequently peak during the evening and deep into the night. The sun disappears from the sky, but the danger does not leave with it. You step out of a restaurant at 11 o'clock at night, expecting a cool breeze, and you are instantly hit by a suffocating blanket of hot, wet air that coats your lungs and sticks to your skin. There is no natural relief. There is no reset button for the human body. Dubai once escaped the violent heat of the day by hiding indoors. Now the humidity has stolen the night as well. The darkness simply remains outside the glass, waiting for the mechanical cooling system to become tired. A city does not need to vanish in a spectacular explosion in order to experience a collapse. A collapse can be slow, quiet, and entirely mechanical. A city collapses when its natural outdoor spaces become entirely unusable for half the year. It collapses when its streets become nothing more than hostile distances that must be rapidly crossed to reach the next air-conditioned safe zone. It collapses when electricity stops being a modern convenience and becomes the absolute non-negotiable condition for biological survival. Dubai once sold the world the shimmering image of a futuristic utopia that had conquered the harshness of the desert. But when the atmosphere outside feels like 62 degrees, the truth is undeniable. The desert has never been conquered. The extreme climate has merely been held at bay, held entirely outside, by a delicate wall of glass-chilled water, high-pressure pumps, and a network of machinery that is never allowed to rest. The tourism pressure, the empty secondary real estate, and the massive grid demand are all symptoms of the same terminal diagnosis. Every new hotel adds another burden to the grid. Every record in peak demand forces the life support machine to grow larger and more complex. Every humid night removes another opportunity for the city to recover naturally. Dubai is not adapting to its environment. It is executing a continuous, highly expensive retreat from it, one refrigerated building at a time. Dubai did not build a paradise in the sand. It built a giant life support machine, and it called the fact that the machine has not stopped a victory. If you value documentaries that look beyond the polished marketing brochures and uncover the structural realities of our modern world, hit the subscribe button. The warning signs of a fragile system are rarely found where the tourism board tells you to look. Tell us in the comments below, would you live 40 floors up in a sealed glass tower, knowing your survival depends entirely on a water pump in the basement? This documentary script is an independent analysis based on publicly available data, meteorological records, and infrastructural reports as of the time of research. Economic conditions, tourism metrics, and environmental factors are subject to constant change. This video analyzes systemic pressures, infrastructure models, and macroeconomic trends, and is not intended to target or criticize residents or any specific demographic. The information presented does not constitute financial investment or personal travel advice. Certain conclusions are analytical inferences drawn from the verified sources discussed.